No quarter!
Okay, so here is Rome 2 1 year on. I guess I'm back here again as I feel some obligation to return to the scene of the crime. You know, just in case I catch the killer here masturbating.
The AI obviously is trying to win the battle.
Oh, you sick fuck! And with the recent announcement of the Attila expansion, now's as good a time as any for a retrospective on what's been changed, and what they can do to make the expansion worthwhile. I mean, it certainly plays better than it did, and that stems from a lot of tweaking they've done after a year of desperate patchwork. The campaign flows smoother thanks to some AI work and stat changes on the buildings. If there was one grand piece of praise to attach to the game, it would be that. The campaign is a lot less fucking tedious. Unfortunately, the campaign map is not what makes Total War interesting or very appealing. There are any number of strategy games on the market that provide an infinitely more in-depth and attractive strategic challenge than any Total War game. Total War is about the battles, and to that end, the game sadly still wallows in mediocrity. That's not to say it hasn't taken a leap and a bound since launch. I mean, I guess there's only up to go from rock bottom.
The eyes of the Senate and all Rome are upon us today.
There were a lot of issues with battles in Rome too. Some have been fixed, like fire at will for units with javelins, but I lack the interest to chase up every concern I had in my original review. Because important as those concerns are, there is one core problem with battles in Rome 2. The Warscape engine. The Warscape engine was made and launched with Empire Total War, Creative Assembly's second most infamous title. Its legacy leaves battles with two handicaps, unit collision and kill moves. The Warscape engine did not have inbuilt unit collision. The units will happily walk through each other, and they'll strongly give you the impression that you're commanding the army of the dead. At launch, Rome 2 was no better than its predecessors. Upon units charging, all the soldiers would smush together into an incomprehensible mess. They may as well have just put the units in a dust cloud out of Looney Tunes and have the fight happen in there. As of Emperor Edition, however, the situation has improved. Soldiers are less likely to morph together, and some units will stop before phasing into their brethren. Sadly, it doesn't look anywhere near as impressive as it sounds though. Rome 2 does now have a version of unit collision, but it's a sad imitation of the originals. Imagine it's something like this. In Rome 1 and Medieval 2, the units are like my hands. They collide. Whereas in the Warscape engine, however, it's more like the shadows of my hands. They don't collide. Now with the Emperor Edition, there are still shadows. They just try and make sure they don't collide. The unit collision in the Warscape engine has never really been true collision. It's just an imitation. And like any imitation, it really just falls apart whenever you try and do something complicated. In Rome 1, the soldiers would push at each other, the front lines would move, the weaker force, or the overwhelmed force, would be pushed further and further back in the brawl until the line buckled and the soldiers could pour through. In Rome 2, two units can come together, but there is no pushing or shoving between forces, just static formations. In Rome 1, soldiers had real mass. They would charge in and crash into the opponent. The men behind them stopped because the soldiers in front stopped them. Sometimes in Rome 2, when the leading rank of a unit collides with another, the entire unit, in perfect synchronization, stops dead. Other times, the ranks behind just clank to a halt. You can't tell me Rome 2's look better. The only ones that come close are the barbarian sword units, but even they are just so flaccid in comparison. Cavalry still has absolutely no weight to it. Look at these charges. Does it actually feel like the cataphracts are slamming into the rear of the British hordes? All it looks like is a fucking mess to me.
Our general is under attack.
Nothing quite exacerbates the problems Warscape has than cavalry. Everything deeply wrong with the engine is painfully pronounced by them. The most glaring is of course the unit collision. All these horsemen phasing through each other, smushing together with their friends and enemies. Soldiers squishing every which way about. So unit collision between infantry is better, but it still looks worse than Rome 1's. It's still a weaker gameplay mechanic than Rome 1's, and it still fails to be immersive. There's lots of weird things with the Warscape engine, and just like the ocean, it gets more bizarre the deeper I go. Why are all my soldiers chewing their faces off? Did they all shelf a pill before the battle? Why are all my soldiers hunchbacks? Is this an equal opportunities employment drive? Why do spear units form these demilitarized zones along the line, where everyone's staring vaguely at each other, one or two enthusiasts breaking the monotony? Why does pausing the game cause everything to skip forwards, then backwards to a freeze? Why does putting the game in slow motion cause running soldiers to rubber band back and forth as they run? Why, after realizing this, do I now notice them rubber banding in real time as well? Why do entire units react to things in perfect synchronization, all turning at the exact same moment in the exact same direction? Christ, it must be dark down there in the fucking uncanny valley. In Rome 1, soldiers reacted to orders at different times. You know, like real people.
Move! Move!
How come soldiers slide around on the ground, rotating on an axis to get into position? Oh, I see. It's because of kill moves, the second malignant mass attached to this engine. This discussion will get a bit confusing, so allow me to preface it with some terminology. In the Warscape engine, the vast majority of the soldier-to-soldier engagements occurs via a set animation, generally ranging from 1 to 10 seconds in length and involving two opposing soldiers. These animations are motion captured by stuntmen and then rigged to the models. These are called kill moves. In Rome 1 and Medieval 2, the soldier-to-soldier engagements occurred via a series of 1-second animations between two or more soldiers. These animations are designed in stages. There's the attacker animation and the defender animation. Now, the defender animation will only occur if the attacker completes his attack animation. There's no real word for this system. I just call it Rome 1's engine. The problem with kill moves was that once the animations began, no other soldiers could interact with the two in the kill move. This meant that if one Roman peasant was surrounded by 100 barbarian giants, only one giant could fight the peasant at a time. And if that one peasant kept getting lucky, he could tie up this unit of 100 for a battle-deciding length of time. In Rome 1's engine, however, every barbarian in clobbering distance could swing away. Rome 1's engine also meant that each time a group of soldiers clashed, the battle between them all would play out differently. The Roman knocked to the ground gets up and stabs the Gaul to his back, engaging his two friends. The Gaul dies and then he re-engages his original opponent. His allies then come to save him as he's knocked to the ground and they kill his opponent. However, it could have been just as likely that the second Roman might have missed, the first Roman killed whilst on the ground, and the Gaul finish off the second Roman. Or anything could happen, because the engine's design allowed for the combat between the soldiers to play out dynamically. With kill moves, the exact same thing happens every time the animation starts, so the battle is boring to watch. After a few matches, you'll have seen all the kill moves on offer, and they just become meaningless and uninteresting to view. So kill moves prove to be worse in immersion, spectacle, and gameplay compared to Rome 1's engine. With all these patches to Rome 2, however, the combat has been changed. It's better than it was. Now soldiers can attack in moves reminiscent of Rome 1's engine. Kill moves are still dominating the combat, but now at least they can be interrupted by the soldiers around them lashing out with a cheap shot. So on a gameplay mechanic level, Rome 2's battles have been improved. The word improved here is a double-edged sword, sadly. They look shit. The way soldiers hurl themselves to the ground from these dainty pokes makes you think they motion captured a soccer player. But no, they actually just appropriated the animation from soldiers getting hit by missiles. Also, there's no reactionary animation from these attacks, so soldiers doing them can only interrupt another if they kill them. Whereas in Rome 1, they could interrupt the enemy with non-lethal attacks and force the enemy to dodge or block or take damage, and importantly, that would stop that enemy from completing his attack. So whilst it is mechanically improved, it's still mechanically inferior to Rome 1. And because they look so terrible, it's just as flawed from an immersion and spectacle standpoint. Yeah, the two biggest points that ruined battles for me have been improved upon. They're a hell of a lot better, but battles in Rome 2 still haven't even surpassed Shogun 2's. So the game still just fails to me. The battles feel so wrong. Looking at the way the soldiers fight, the sudden horrific jerks and spasms of motion like a possessed corpse. I mean, look at this scene. Notice anything kinda weird? Look again. This time, follow what this soldier is doing. Either he's a fucking wizard, or the jerry-rigging they've done to this engine has ended up with some loose screws whirring around in the rotor. That was a pretty extreme example, but it really underlines what feels so alien about the combat. Look at them convulsing into action to do an awkward jab or react to being hit. Look at them sliding around. Oh, no, wait. I see why they're slipping over. Look at the floor. It's been polished way too much. I had no idea you could get dirt to shine like that. This is max every graphics setting too. And even when they do get into position for these bloody kill moves and start moving normally, they look like they're stage acting. Maybe this is a minor point just for me, but as someone who's done rudimentary physical theatre, the bodge jobs just stick out to me. Like a pair of testicles in an apple tree. Does no one else notice how he's stabbing him under the armpit? It's fucking amateur. Look at the silly way they're fighting. They're just hitting the opponent's sword or shield. Look, he holds the sword out for the other bloke to hit with his sword. Fucking 5-year-olds fight like that, not soldiers from antiquity. What's the point of motion capturing the kill moves for realism if the moves themselves are just so obviously fake? Allow me to echo some older words of mine. Rome 1's engine was a bridge over a river. It was rickety, ugly, and it creaked when you crossed it. But it worked. Warscape's engine is a log, floating in the river, tied hastily into position with ropes. It can't take anywhere near as much weight as the bridge, it bounces around in the current, and it has a shitty tendency to sink into the water when you step on it. After 14 patches, all I see are a few more ropes lassoed onto this log, but those do far too little to stop my feet from getting wet. There are other problems that are still bugging me. The unit cards, UI issues, guard mode, the fact that the music actually sucks life out of the game rather than adding to it, the bland, wet sound effects, the voice acting done by the interns, Mark, fucking monotone.
The men are wavering.
But important as those toppings are, they pale in comparison to my root problem with this game. The soldiers lack mass. They lack presence. They just don't feel real watching them. Not when I've seen the better engine that ran Rome 1 and Medieval 2. Christ, Shogun 2 actually had the soldiers feeling real. This game simply has no heart. It has no soul. Shogun 2 was a game with some real polish behind it. It's the reason why it overcame its Warscape limitations, to still be loved by the community and by me. Here is what the combat, sound effects, music and voice work should have been. In Rome 2, the up-close and personal effects are miserable, just like in Empire, whereas in Shogun, Rome and Medieval it was real. Here is the rain bucketing down on cold, merciless samurai brutally brawling to the death. And here are Romans and Gauls, awkwardly slapping at each other. Here are the last remnants of the Varangian Guard defending their emperor to the bitter end against the Mongolian hordes as Constantinople burns around them. Here are Carthaginians standing in a line as they get picked off by slingers. Here is the full fury of the unknown barbarian world descending upon Varus's doomed legions. Here is the same thing. They don't compare. In some crucial way, they just don't. That's why Rome 2 doesn't compare. That's why Rome 2 will never be fixed. The battles just don't compare to any of the other Total Wars, and least of all to the originals. That is why 1 year on, I'm still as disappointed by this game as I was on launch. I'm not saying the game is bad, or that the game isn't fun, or that CA didn't take some steps in the right direction. It's just that at the level that matters the absolute most to me, ground level, down there with the grunts, slugging it out, is where the game fails. Because it's the sequel, and it should have been better there, not worse. Having both games at my fingertips is like surgery with anesthetic and surgery without anesthetic. Yeah, either way the surgery will do its job, but as someone who has both available, I see no reason not to go with the anesthetic. Look, at least Creative Assembly weren't so hubristic as to actually call their Game of the Year edition a Game of the Year edition. The euphemism of Emperor edition is far more fitting. Perhaps they should have gone with the Nero edition. Some people are claiming that the game is good with mods and that it really comes into its own there, but I'm always going to be dragged back to my point about the battles. Specifically, the engine's inherent problems. And once you drag the mods out, you have the entire repertoire of Rome 1 to compete with. And the Rome 2 mods will just come out second. As if it were their fucking fault for having to deal with the Warscape engine. No. I don't think it's particularly fair to be pitting the work of the modding community against each other. So now we look to the future, to Attila. Surprisingly enough, I do find myself interested by the game, enough to keep my ear to the ground. Not enough by any means to buy it. The last time Total War fucked me, I didn't touch it till 4 years later, when I bought the entire series for $20 in a Steam bundle. But I am interested enough to follow their path through the desert, to see if they find a new land, or their doom. Barring a miracle, the combat between soldiers in Attila will not be its strong suit. As deeply disappointing as that is, it doesn't have to be a death blow for it, like it was allowed to be in Rome 2. Because it wasn't in Shogun 2 or Empire. What made those games still special were other aspects of it. In Shogun, it was just the sheer level of polish that dripped out of the game. Shogun 2 is the most atmospheric Total War they've made. Just play a night battle on the Helm's Deep map and tell me the game isn't. Shogun 2's battles still had all the flaws of the Warscape engine, but they designed around those problems to still make it wonderful. It has the best AI of any Total War game, a very developed sense of unit roles, the rock, paper, scissors gameplay, and the best use of generals in the series. Shogun 2 was the game that was the most rewarding and the most punishing from your unit composition, because the game was really designed around how the different classes interplayed. Empire was all about the slow march forward of musket battalions under the orchestra of cannon fire, micromanaging unit formations to maximize the firepower you could bring to bear down on individual units, and judging the perfect time to deliver a morale shock to break the enemy. Medieval 2 was the slowest paced Total War, centered around heavy cavalry, and the game was all about tying the enemy down with infantry to a position where you could punish them with your knights. Rome 1 was probably the fastest paced Total War, and was all about setting the opponent up for one massive morale shock to break his entire army. So that's really why when I hear about the importance of fatigue, the fire dynamics, and the new ideas for siege warfare, I am interested by Attila. I'd give 2 bits of advice here. First, capture the theme of the approaching apocalypse. It does look like they are trying to do this, but it needs to be handled properly. The music is an absolute priority here, and the news that Richard Beddow will be doing it is a bad sign. His lackluster tracks are nothing but grating background noise. Kick him to the curb and bring on Jeff Van Dyke. For those of you who don't know, he was the composer behind Rome 1, Medieval 2, and Shogun 2. But the theme of doom and despair is something that must be present throughout the whole game's aesthetic. Not just the music, but in the voice work, the campaign map, the announcer, sound effects, animations, graphics, fucking everything. If you can make Total War Attila feel dark, desolate, apocalyptic, if they can make every turn on the campaign, every battle you play, feel like you, the player, are desperately defending the dying light of civilization, if you can build the theme as convincing as this, you might just make the game immersive. Just like Shogun 2, and that will do wonders for it. But not only does it need its own theme in a polished sense, it also needs one in a gameplay sense. Just like I listed for all those Total Wars, they each have their own subtle differences in how they play, in what makes them unique. If you can give Attila a focus for the battles that makes the game stand out, that's appealing enough to get past the Warscape engine, then you will make it a good game. In both those cases, it does look like they are trying to do that. Or at least saying they are doing that. But there is one last thing to confront though. and it's the trust shattered by Rome 2's release.
And we really want to make the city feel like it's been under siege for several years. So it's a kind of darker view of siege war. It's damaged, it's worn, it's dark, it's smoking. We want to make this approach feel apocalyptic. This is super early code. We're way pre-alpha. What that means is there's loads of features, not just in terms of the graphics, but also in terms of the combat and the animations that actually aren't in the game yet. So the final game's actually going to look way better than this. We're working our guts out on this game, and we're determined to make it the best Total War game ever. We've got a huge budget for the game, about 40% bigger than anything we've done before. So we're absolutely determined to make it the most epic Total War title ever.
You lied to us!
I'd finish by asking Creative Assembly one question. I'll even phrase it in a way that doesn't make them admit to doing wrong. If you could pitch your game in one paragraph to the people who bought Rome 2 and who felt utterly betrayed by the game they received, whose trust in you was destroyed by a game they felt was unacceptable, to the people who feel you have completely lost your way as a developer, what would you say to those people as to what sets Attila apart from all the other Total Wars? As to what sets it apart from Rome 2? Essentially, as to what makes it worth their money? As to what it does that no other Total War does? What would you say to convince them to give you one more chance? To believe that your new game will not be a disappointment? If they can't answer that question in a way that gives any of you who feel like that any shred of confidence, then it probably means Attila will just be one more death throw. Yeah, I'm done here with this game, barring something actually game-changing coming along. I'm sorry to those of you who are expecting a full 2 hours on the Emperor Edition. I cannot be asked. Don't worry though. Please enjoy as a consolation prize 5 minutes of me draping my cat with socks. This is Dr. Sane, showcasing gratuitous pictures of pussy? Close enough. Cheers, cunts.
wait unknowing. This is the price of war. We rise rise with noble intentions, and we risk all that is pure.